Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. They warned me they will be throwing flowers at 10 years. I see this evening. So business as usual, because 10 years, it's a great thing, but maybe nothing special. When we look in our lives, what we can do when we are 10, riding a bicycle, learning to swim, maybe some first love, whatever, nothing spectacular. But for events of this sort, 10 years, I think it's a little achievement. We should be proud. I don't mean we in the Slovak Atlantic Commission, but we, all of us who are here in the room, because this event could not happen without, of course, the great corporate support and partnerships we have, but without that splendid audience we've been having and splendid speakers for the last 10 years. And it's great privilege and pleasure to welcome so many presidents in the room, so many prime ministers at the conference, ministers, great minds, captains of the industry. That's a great privilege and great pleasure. For the last 10 years, been only 2, so I want to make special recognition to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who's been partner for Globsec since the beginning, and our corporate partner who is on the top, it's the BAE Systems. Those 2 deserve special credit, and we are very grateful for those 2 to be with us since the beginning. I still think there is a great need for conferences like this and for platform in Central Europe on which we can discuss a crucial security strategic affairs. And not only here in Central Europe, what is going on globally in Europe and NATO, but also from here to send our voice in our contribution, what kind of world we are walking into, and what is the way how we want to contribute and change this world. I looked into my previous opening speeches, and now I feel a little idiotic because I tend to say all the time all the same things, and it looks like a cliche. Security matters. There is a plenty of challenges. We should not be negligent. We should care. Nothing is granted. Sounds like cliche, but I will end up with one thing which caught my eye in the morning, because we tend to think EU, NATO, of course, it's been here forever. Why not will stay forever? It's been strong forever. Why not be strong forever? If the EU was such a sexy model of soft power, which is attracting millions of people to come here, it will be here forever. But it's not. It's not granted. We have to care. And there was in your packages, a Globsec Daily. And the quote which caught my eye, which I'd like to stress, was the Edward Lucas quote. Edward. A great little thing. The dreadful mess of 2015. We live in a dreadful mess. And reading out of cliche, quoting Edward Lucas, great friend and great mind, we really live in a complicated, challenging environment and in a dreadful mess. And I'm hoping and wishing you that here collectively we will be able to talk about it, where we are, where do we come from, but in particular, where do we want to get, how to get out of this dreadful mess, to make sure that the democracy, solidarity, freedom, and all the solidarity here in the region and within EU and NATO will continue to be our strength and not our weakness. Thank you all for coming. This is the warm welcome on behalf of the organizers, and now I have a special privilege and pleasure to pass floor on to the chairman of the Globsec conference. Usually we do have 2, because it's linked with Visegrad presidency, but now Deputy Prime Minister Lajčák is going to play a double role, the chairman, the presidency, and the Slovak foreign minister as well. Dear Mr. Minister, please, floor is yours, and get ready because I'll be going around the stage to bring another guest, which is a very interesting one. All the best. Thank you very much, Minister, for coming and opening.
Pastor, and I will try to follow your advice. Dobrý deň a vitajte. Good afternoon. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bratislava. Welcome to Globsec. 1 year ago, I was standing right here, trying to get across at least some positive messages. I already suspected like we all did, that it won't be an easy year. But sincerely, I did not expect it to be that hard. But it was, sometimes even harder than we could bear with dignity. Many issues on the international agenda have gone from bad to worse. Many tabled solutions, from promising to void. And most notably, they are all too close and too painful. It's not a nice picture that I'm drawing here, but it's a realistic one. And exactly this is something that we have to stick to under any circumstances. We need to have realistic plans, realistic expectations, realistic implementation, and a realistic feedback. If the last year's pileup of crises gave us something useful, it's the regained ability to shake off our own ignorance, self-illusion, and drowning into our own internal problems, which are minor to the major ones around us. However, I have the feeling that we still don't listen to, but rather past each other, which is maybe the most important item still waiting to be picked up from the lost and found of international politics in this complicated year. But to continue on a bit more positive note and take a look at ourselves in the first place. Last year, I was talking about the progress in stabilizing the Eurozone. And even from today's view, I still stand behind this position. The crisis punch that the European Union suffered put two crucial things in motion. First, the alarm call to mobilize efforts and come up with concrete measures was duly received. And second, at last, we started to think more strategically here and understood that the monetary footing without its fiscal counterpart will always walk with a visible limp, unless we stop ignoring this elementary logical imbalance. But what about Greece? One could argue. Candidly speaking, the willingness to help Greece at any price is minimal across Central and Eastern Europe, because we are talking about the part of Europe that voluntarily went through a long period of strict austerity and deeply painful reforms, to make it clear. Greece has to be exposed to strict measures, that's for sure. But on the other hand, it is understandable that the aim is to get the country back afoot and not to keep it on its knees. We are ready to consider various options, provided that the Greece will meet the conditions. A Grexit, seemingly logical to some, is not about the 1.5% share of the overall EU economy. If Athens defaulted on its debts, it would certainly send shockwaves throughout the whole of Europe. Yet, it takes two to tango. What about the UK, which is another pertinent issue when it comes to the European Union future? I'm sure that we will all learn much more on this from the UK's Prime Minister David Cameron himself shortly. But let me still make a few comments first. I don't think that most people on the aisles or in the continent sincerely believe that the UK's potential departure from the European Union would do any good to London, including the city, or say to Edinburgh. Pragmatically speaking, I don't see much gain or benefit in exit, neither economically nor politically in the long run for both sides of the channel. Nonetheless, I do see positive side of the entire Brexit exercise. It made us all think again about the European Union's strategic heading, something we have long neglected and almost lost amidst the multi-speed Europe, something we owe to the founding fathers of European integration. It's a challenge, true, but it's also an opportunity to reflect on some elements of the European Union's foundations. There is always space for improvement, as the cliché aptly has it. We mustn't be afraid of any discussions and multitude of opinions, even on our very basics. I prefer a fervent debate concluded by a jointly owned compromise over playing the deaf and blind game and sending out opposing messages in the end of the day. An open and intense internal discussion is what makes us stronger and not weaker. We in Slovakia are ready for it. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, when I was talking about Ukraine, I talked about the new element of instability, right in our backyard. Well, now we know this instability unfortunately settled in, and it's not going to vanish unless we manage to deal with a couple of painful facts. First, we are not in a new Cold War, but the post-Cold War order, as we knew it, did suffer a major blow. Some even argue that it's already dead. Second, we do have a problem with Russia, but there is no problem solving without Russia either. Third, Russia is not prepared to give up on Crimea, and we don't really know how to deal with that. Fourth, we have no business as usual with Russia, but there are still many unfinished businesses to do on Iran, on North Korea, on all major disarmament regimes, nukes, terrorism, and then there is a Security Council and Russia in it, if nowhere else. On top of all that, we tend to ignore the fact that a huge part of the world doesn't care that much about what we in Europe see as a major geopolitical problem. Let's face it. And lastly, there will be no quick fixes. Resolving issues with Russia could take a long time. Sooner or later, we'll have to talk to Moscow, as shuffling around won't get us anywhere. What we badly need today is to fundamentally redefine our relations with Russia. At the same time, we need to think, better target, and make our support to Ukraine much stronger than it's the case today. This is what Slovakia, as a neighbor and friend of Ukraine, is trying to achieve. We started with a reverse gas flow, which helped Ukraine through the winter and saved its tight budget up to $3 billion. Gazprom decreased our supplies of gas by over 40% almost immediately. The reverse makes now for more than 70% of Ukraine's gas imports and covers almost 40% of the country's overall gas needs. Speaking of solidarity, stronger support is not about more money, or certainly not about more money only, and definitely not about more strong statements. It's about strategic assistance with reforms, about vision and coordination, which is lacking today, despite the indisputable efforts on the side of the Ukrainian central and local authorities. The external assistance should be orchestrated on the broadest possible level, engaging as many institutional partners and assistance frameworks with different niche capacities as possible, the European Union, the OSCE, and the OECD as well. And I'm glad to inform you that upon Slovakia's initiative, the OECD held a very useful and successful Day of Ukraine this Tuesday. The aim of the event is to boost Ukraine's interaction with the organization, make the best of its expertise, focus more on putting more concrete projects into practice in areas such as anti-corruption, public and corporate governance, tax administration, and the reform of the state-owned enterprises. It has a serious potential to bring some order into the Ukrainian institutional model, along with what many of us already do bilaterally. Another irreplaceable ingredient in helping Ukraine is the OSCE. It's mostly the only toolbox and the human rights first aid package we can apply on the spot. In order to succeed, we need to acknowledge that Ukraine today has the most pro-reform government ever, but there are still many players outside but also inside of the country which rather wish for a failure of the ongoing effort and reforms. And the danger of the collapse of state structures is everything but averted. Even the association agreement and DCFTA provides no 100% guarantee. According to the latest public opinion polls, only 31% of Ukrainians consider the country's stabilization efforts effective, and more than 50% are completely or almost completely discontented with how things in the country are progressing. And in the meanwhile, we need to better communicate that reforms, however painful, are for the good of the people of Ukraine, and also that their future depends mostly on them and no one else. After all, this is a lesson learned very well here in Central Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, what I was not talking about much last year was Europe's southern border. The Arab Spring that swept through the Middle East and North Africa removed several autocrats, but also turned the spring into a brutal winter, swiftly producing new threats. Proliferation of extremism, combined with influx of migrants, transnational crime, and economic instability, poses a direct danger to European security. There is no silver bullet solution for the crisis in North Africa, which is progressively getting even more severe, especially in Libya. Yet, a state of inaction could dangerously flash back on the streets of our capitals. Addressing these challenges will require both courage and prudence, both in economic and political terms, combined with security engagement with all stakeholders, state and non-state. Helping to build tailor-made state institutions, but also strengthening the existing ones, and in some cases the remaining ones, presents a long-run challenge without immediate quick wins. But it could bring preventive solution for decreasing instability, added roots, where is needed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a turning point for Euro-Atlantic security. The trouble that we face in the East and in the South made us engage in what we have long neglected: hard, energy, and cybersecurity, new threats, propaganda, and NATO's vulnerable eastern flank, and reminded us of the values that we firmly stand for. Transatlantic community faces rising challenges at multiple fronts. Long-term trends, be it changing demographics in our societies, rise of Asia, political awakening in the Arab world. This all meets with immediate security concerns along our periphery. Indeed, a ring of fire, as Carl Bildt pointed out. We are well aware where European allies must wade in, especially in area of reinvesting in NATO's capabilities. Boosting of defense budgets will not happen overnight, but since Wales and towards Warsaw, we must be all on the right track towards more fair. Our potential is high. Our common toolbox is wide and still improving, but we must adapt to act more swiftly on complex issues, narrow our differences, but also to bring back our initiative in order to have the possibility to shape conflicts before they develop into crises. What personally concerns me is the lack of strategic thinking that we have been going through lately, and also the related failure of prevention, as the report of the OSCE's panel of eminent persons points out aptly. There are questions vital to our future to which we need to have answers, like how do we see our relations with Russia in 10 or 15 years from now? How flexible are we going to be on sanctions once there is a progress? Why do we accept that the two closest ever integration frameworks, NATO and the European Union, have so little institutional synergy? What will be the outcome of our lately shy open door policy, both in the European Union and NATO? How can we aid building European societies in countries to which we deny European perspective? And how do we adapt our neighborhood policy in order to raise our once natural political gravity? The missing answers clearly prove that we have neglected our basic political homework. We have existing organizational instruments that the other geopolitical regions can only dream of. Besides the United Nations, we have the European Union, we have NATO, we have OECD, we have Council of Europe, and also the overarching OSCE. So why not to use them to their fullest? It's the venues and this where we could and should catch up, where our patterns of thinking are exposed to useful outside perception and genuinely global scrutiny. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the way forward? We should build our future actions on hard facts and hard facts only. We have enough resources and tools of verification. Let us use them in a timely manner. We should avoid taking what we consider appropriate in theory to be appropriate in general. It often proves far from ideal on the ground and causes much havoc. Excluding or sidelining someone of little liking it is often tempting, but may also unwantedly compromise the only feasible solution on the ground. What appears as a window of opportunity for a positive regime change towards more democracy may become a breeding ground for extremists. We should therefore pay more attention to the often neglected socio-economic factors. And when more than one of these mistakes occur together, as they often do, combined with underestimating of local unsensitivities, we usually end up with entirely new threats emerging on multiple front lines, such as Boko Haram, Islamic States, or the migration issue in the Mediterranean. A chain of specific bad decisions almost always results in complex problems. Furthermore, it's easy to choose quick fix solutions and populist gestures over politically harder but more sustainable politics in the long run. The outcome is usually extreme, aggressive, and irrational. And that's why we face a growing number of hatred-based and non-systemic parties all over Europe. Sometimes we miss an opportunity by ignoring what's obviously needed. We tend to over-concentrate on bureaucratic and technical aspects and may lose much more in the end. And to be clear, I'm speaking now about Montenegro's invitation to join NATO. Sometimes it takes us too long to agree on procedural issues when a crisis surfaces, and the chances that the job will be taken by someone else in the meantime shoot up, not speaking about the lost momentum to become a part of the solution. We overestimate the scope of we consider our like-minded world. We often formulate our statements as if the we was standing for almost the entire world, yet it isn't. Many bigger or smaller players beyond the West, across Asia or Latin America, share very little of our concerns. We can't take their support for our actions for granted. We should invest time and energy to make sure that they understand our purpose and support our actions. And on top of that, we should pay much more attention to local specifics. They truly matter. We should all start genuinely listening to each other, not only between opposed sides, but also among us. Everybody has a niche capacity, no matter how big or small the country is. And finally, as I already said, let us remind ourselves of the importance of international institutions. Many of them are currently suffering from a lack of balance. And sometimes it's their own member states that contribute to their erosion. As a result, we have seen push for reforms in our multilateral architecture. I say openly, I'm not a big fan of creating new, alternative, or ad hoc structures unless absolutely necessary. Instead, I believe that we should stick to what we have already created, what we have already created. A fine-tuning might be necessary and useful, but we need to give a chance to existing structures. We are nowhere near the rim of their possibilities and exploitation. Ladies and gentlemen, looking at the audience, looking at you, I feel pleased and honored to have so many political and experts, heavyweights, with us here in Bratislava today. Bratislava being already a firm place on the map of transatlantic thinking. Globsec and Slovakia are symbolically connected in their success stories. The forum is a unique NGO to government project that evolved from its initial student stage into one of the most important security and foreign policy gatherings on a global scale. This is a jubilee year for Globsec. It's round edition number 10. My sincere thanks go to the organizers for putting together such a great event, for not resting on laurels and making it better every year, and for attracting such distinguished and impressive lineup of guests. Being a pragmatic optimist and a Globsec enthusiast, my final message and reminders go back to what I feel obliged to emphasize lately. Speaking as a diplomat, let us prefer even the hardest compromise over aggression. Let us focus more on prevention to be less occupied with crisis management. Let us really listen to each other, no matter whether we agree or not. And finally, let us rediscover the urgent necessity of strategic security thinking. Thank you, and once again, welcome to Bratislava and enjoy the Globsec.